Hello, welcome everybody. So today, I think hopefully a lot of you have seen the announcement that came out about Link. We are incredibly excited because hopefully you've seen the organization that used to be Tech GC is now called the Suite, and we've been acquired by them. So now we're joining the Suite. So it's Link and the Suite together, and hopefully all of you have gotten communications about it, but really what it means is that we're bringing this incredibly well respected and incredibly well known general counsel community in together with our legal ops community, and so we are just so excited about that. So as when we were backstage, Cindy and I were just talking about this great platform that is now available to the Link community called Brain Trust. And so any of you who have been Tech GC members before, the L Suite members before, you know that they have this incredible proprietary system where you can go in and communicate with each other and post things and post questions and polls, and there's all kinds of great data available for us, and now it's available for the Link community as well. So we're extremely excited about that. I'm going to ask Heather on my team to put in the chat the link to apply for the Link community if you haven't already done that. So she'll go ahead and put that in the chat. And so for the rest of you, if you're not members, please go ahead and click that link and apply today. And why I think it's so timely, right, as we announce this incredible acquisition, is today we're joined by Evan and Cindy, and I'm going to ask them in a minute to introduce themselves. But you know, as we think about how we work together to deliver legal services to our clients, um, that role and that relationship between the general counsel and the head of legal operations, the person who's running the business of the legal department, like running it like a business, um, collaboration between those two roles is so critical. And so, you know, I always view our role as the one that really brings the business principles to the practice of law. And so if you want to be seen as a department who is aligned with what the organization's overarching goals are, you know, I think the relationship between the GC sharing their vision, you know, these are the services we're going to deliver to our clients, and us as operations professionals delivering those services. Those two things are so critical to work together. And so today I'm by Cindy Kaneshiro and Evan Wong, and I would love for you both to introduce yourselves to the audience. So Cindy, let's start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Steph. And congrats on the acquisition. If those on the line haven't checked out Link or the new platform yet, please do. It's so awesome. I've already done it myself. My name is Cindy. I work for a enterprise software company called Nutanix, based out of the Bay Area in California. I'm the Director of Legal Operations and Chief of Staff. I started my career as a corporate and securities attorney at a law firm, and then at Nutanix, and then was tapped on the shoulder to start the legal ops function at Nutanix, and have been doing that for almost 6 years now, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, you definitely had that brain to always be doing things better. And so they clearly saw that. That's why they tapped you. And we've had the, of course, pleasure of getting to work with you, Cindy, for quite a while. So it's wonderful. Evan, how about you?
Yeah, hello everyone. Name is Evan Wong. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Checkbox. Thanks for joining us today. Checkbox, if you have never heard of us before, we're a legal intake and workflow automation software company. We work with legal teams from like your SAP to BMW and Pepsi. And it's really about trying to understand what comes through into the legal department, how do we better serve our business clients and do that in an efficient manner through workflow. My background is I was legally trained. I've never practiced. I don't think I was ever smart enough to be a lawyer, so I decided to help lawyers be better lawyers. But I did start my entrepreneurial journey at the age of 17. And no, I do not, even though I look like I'm still 18, I am far much older than that today. So hopefully I can share some of that wisdom working with legal teams over a long period of time in the software space.
Yes. Evan is something. I mean, we've had the pleasure of working with him for quite a while, and he is a man of many talents. Evan, I would classify you as a Renaissance man, and maybe we'll get to see some of that if we at our next Link event. Um, if we bring in a karaoke machine, I think, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Cindy, let's start with you. As we think about, again, I mentioned very briefly, this is really the importance of the role and the relationship between general counsel and the legal ops professional. When GCs, they come to me often saying, what am I looking for in this kind of a role? And I always tell them the number one thing is chemistry. Like, you've really got to have good chemistry together, because you're like two peas in a pod, right? Again, you think of the GC as kind of coming up with the vision, the strategy, and you're the one operationalizing it. So what is your advice, or what do you think is really key for when GCs and legal ops really need to create this collaborative environment?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think GCs and legal ops folks come into a problem set or look at something from a slightly different perspective. So it's incredibly important that you have both perspectives when you're trying to make some important decisions for the team. I think it's important, one, to have that chemistry, and that's sort of an intangible, but you build that working relationship with someone as well. So over time you build up that chemistry, but you can also do things that help that working relationship. For example, myself and my CLO, we have weekly one-on-ones. These are not different from probably any other team. But we also make sure to have a constant communication flow outside of those structured one-on-ones. So every time after he has executive meeting with the direct report staff of the CEO, he'll typically pull me aside and give me any updates. That constant flow of information is so critical, because it allows me to adjust as needed, to know exactly what's going on. And the executive team is constantly making changes to their strategy, thinking about what's new that has come up that maybe we didn't take into account in our strategy before. So just having that constant flow of information. And then in my role, I think it's incredibly important that I help create that environment of transparency and openness amongst the entire legal team. So I see my role as taking that information. Okay, now who needs to know what? And I make sure that those on the team know that. A couple things that my new CLO, and he's been at our company now for 6 months, some new things he's implemented that I love and I think have really helped this culture of openness is being very mindful and thoughtful about who we're inviting to our team meetings. And so, for example, we now have finance regularly join all of our all hands, our QBRs, some of our leadership meetings. And that has helped create a feeling to them that they're a part of our team, and that we're not a black box in legal, and they really support our strategic objectives and making sure we have the right resources and things. And so that kind of openness and collaboration, not just within legal, but outside of legal, I think can really be created even by simple things like, okay, now we're regularly inviting these folks into our meetings. So just having that thoughtfulness, not only in informal ways where I'm sharing information out, but also structurally when we think about who's being invited to our meetings.
Well, yeah, and I think it's so important too, because it creates early buy-in, right? So when you're working with finance, you're working with all of your other business partners, whether it's HR, finance, IT. The earlier they're brought into the process, you're not starting from scratch, right? When you're trying to have to explain to them, hey, look, this is why we're trying to do this. They're hearing the strategy the whole way. So I could see how that's so critical, and I'm a big fan of pulling people in early. It starts that change management process too. Do you think it helps, Cindy, when you're thinking about how you allocate resources and prioritize the things that you want to work on? Does that help? And what are some of the ways that you can do that better? Because I think we've all found that there are competing priorities. People think different things are important, and people just want different things. How do you get people aligned from that perspective?
Yeah, and again, this comes from being in a unique position when you are in legal ops, right? You are actually getting all the information from on the ground on the legal team, and you're very tied into that, obviously, but you're also getting information from the top. So the GC is feeding you information about what the business is doing at the moment and what, oh, this new thing came up. It's very important for the company. We're shifting things toward that at a high level. Okay, what needs to change on the legal team then? And so having a constant ability to adapt what our strategy is in legal to the company's priorities, at the moment, and, looking forward 6, 12, 18 months is really important, because we can decide on a strategy. We can say, okay, these are our important initiatives in the next 6, 12 months. If the company's priority shifts, we have to make sure we're still supporting the right work, because we don't want to end up in a mismatch, and we've been working on this project that, hey, actually doesn't really matter to the business anymore. So, and at that point, you have to, reshift something you've been working on for a long time. So I think it's just a constant again, open communication and being willing to adapt whatever you are doing to that, and then making sure everyone knows that, and the why behind it, I think is so important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And a colleague of ours put something out on LinkedIn last week that I thought was so interesting, that said that while CLOs value the work that they're doing their attorneys are doing at something like 40%, find it highly valuable. Only 14% of CEOs found it highly valuable. And it's for those exact reasons that you're talking about. There's a misalignment between what legal is doing versus, what legal feels like they need to be doing versus what their clients want, and that communication is not happening. And so they're not doing those alignment conversations and that value communication of, here's the value, instead of like heads down, you know what I mean, actually communicating. I think that's such a critical piece of that. um Evan, how have you seen technology support relationships, as we're talking about, how GCs and legal ops collaborate here? How do you see technology playing a role? And if you could maybe kind of add in what you think about AI and all of it, just a light topic that's not nobody's thinking about these days.
We got to tick off the AI box at some point. Might as well get it out of the way at the beginning. No, I think, well, first of all, I think there's a lot of work that sits in legal and in legal ops that's not technology. And I think when Cindy talked about some of the examples in building relationship, a lot of that is about trust, building conversation and information. And a lot of the parts that just are to do with partnering with your business leader. But if I take a different angle of looking at how technology brings it all together, I would say, nothing. There's a certain level of trust and relationship that's actually built through doing projects together, and technology projects in particular, because of their complexity and the impact that it has at the end of it going live, really kind of compounds that relationship building. Like Cindy talked about, like making sure the projects are, solving the most important problem. And for you, Steph, you said like make sure it's not just the legals problem, but what the business cares about, our business clients. If we can ensure that that's aligned, and we turn what is maybe an idea or an aspiration of a business outcome into a tangible, thing, because that's what technology is. It turns ideas into things that people interact with. Then I think that journey of going through that project is really going to cement that relationship. Some of the business outcomes that are common, it's not going to be a surprise to people here. Things like, either we're looking for more efficiency or more visibility, or sometimes it might be about risk management. We hear a lot about visibility and efficiency being key considerations nowadays for GCs. And so the more that legal ops can find technologies that align to those concepts, whether it's, I don't know, if you're in a SaaS company, maybe it's speeding up the turnaround time for contracts, or the way that you sign on new partners for your commercial teams, or if you're a big, I don't know, if you're a big like more traditional industry organization and you have a big legal team, efficiency might come in the form of like self-service for those low value tasks, right? And so there's different ways that I think a technology project can shape up to meet those business needs. And the more that legal ops can ensure that, one, the project is the most high impact, but two, really working and partnering with the GC to get to that outcome, I think will build a really strong relationship. I'll share with you a, oh, sorry, was it? No, I'll share with you a story. There was in fact, a paralegal in a big FMCG company who was working closely with the GC doing, traditional paralegal work. When they brought on technology like Checkbox, her role completely changed. It went from sort of administrative tasks to actually thinking about the layer behind that, thinking about how do we actually streamline and automate a lot of these workflows. And she became all of a sudden the most important partner to the GC and was eventually promoted to an innovation and transformation manager. And she's built like 90 plus workflows. And so that kind of transformation journey and that relationship that's really built is really key, because at the end of the day, the GC needs to worry about all of the company's biggest legal and compliance risks. And whilst they have the brain and the intention and the need to affect all these business changes from a function perspective, running legal like a business, as you say, they need the support, the arms and legs from legal ops to make that a reality.
Yeah. It's funny because did you are you I
No,
want you to
no,
finish
please.
your
I
thought.
was just thinking about that box about AI that we haven't ticked, but please, if you have a comment, let's go there first.
Oh yeah, okay. No, you go back and talk about AI in a second, but I was chuckling because as you're talking about this person who's built out so many workflows, I thought to myself, you better not say that out loud because Brian and Sumi on the UpLevel team will want to steal her from
So I'm not making this. So I'm not making this up. We were literally on a panel once, and the GC was speaking, and the GC was scared to name this paralegal because he was scared she was going to get poached. He warned the entire room. He was like, "Don't look her up on LinkedIn. She's not. Yeah. So,
but you said that before we jump to the AI topic, you said something that's so important. And another client and we were just talking about this in our assessments. Like when we do work at UpLevel, we talk a lot about like work joy, right? Like in many ways, a lot of what we do on the administrative side, which falls under our purview, it's become kind of a grind, right? And so to your point of this paralegal, maybe she was like literally taking, because we've seen this, right? Taking fields from a contract and manually, putting it into their CLM or whatever, right? Like there's so many things where we kind of grind our gears every day. And so as we think about, look, efficiency is going to come, cost savings is going to come, but I'm kind of sick of talking about it in those terms. I'm sure you guys are too, right? Like the do more with less, which I hate. And so if we can kind of think of it as like, no, like we're making our lives easier. We're stopping this. Like, how many times a day are you like, why am I even doing this? Right? If we can get rid of that stuff, that's going to make everybody's jobs happier as ops professionals. It's going to make us like absolutely beloved in our departments, right? And so, and the cost savings, all of it will come, the visibility to data, all of that's critical, all of it will come. But it's just kind of a pivot to thinking about how we could be happier in our jobs, honestly.
Oh, 100%. I don't know how many people know this about our company at Checkbox, but our company mission, you can find this like on our website, is actually to empower meaningful work for all. That's actually why we exist, meaningful work. And so when you talk about joy and yes, you can talk about it in terms of cost savings and things like that, but fundamentally, like at the human level, we spend so much of our time at work, and it's our mission is to try and make it meaningful no matter what you do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. And Cindy, you look like you might have wanted to say something there too.
No, I was just going to just echo, what you guys are saying. I think technology can be such a powerful way to show a lot of what legal is doing. Obviously, we'll talk later about intake and actual data, but the number of times where, someone, the CLO or someone else has come and said, oh, we're trying to work on this problem now. This has become very critical to the company. And if we can say, hey, we actually have a tool that can do that, or we can help you get there, with this tool or that tool, or this is something legal's been working on already, we are an amazing business partner at that point. You know, we are enabling the business in a very real way. And so technology has been so important for us to be able to show up as the type of really modern, you know, strategic business partner that we want to be seen as.
Yeah. Yes. Couldn't agree more. Okay. And then before we jump to anything else, Evan, finish your thoughts on AI.
Okay, so I'm going to try and not end up, because this could be a whole webinar in itself.
I
Many,
know.
perhaps. All
No,
right.
you have
So,
30 seconds to talk about all of AI and how it's going to affect us here from a workflow perspective.
oh my goodness. Okay, so first of all, AI can be applied in so many areas in legal today. It's already happening, right? Like I think rewind a year ago, we were contemplating some of the use cases. They're real now. So you look at like your e-billing systems, there's automatic like invoice review and matching that with your outside counsel guidelines, contract review, there's like auto redlining. And then in our space at Checkbox, it's really about how does AI help with the legal intake process and the workflow process. And how I've seen it make the biggest impact, like legal intake, or call it the legal front door, I think is not a new concept. In fact, some people might even look at it and wince a little bit like, oh, that's a lot of change management, right? But the beauty of where AI has really changed that now and why a lot of people are re-looking at it is because the change is that there is no change. Like the whole goal of AI today in the context of legal intake and workflow is to eliminate change management. It's to actually keep the business in Slack, in Teams, in email, however they come to you, and then have AI intelligently extract out the information from unstructured text and then basically create your matters, fill in your forms. And so that whole experience is completely different. And that's really important because I think if we tie back to the webinar topic, which is, you know, GCs and legal ops, the reason why I find in the past this has been a difficult adoption challenge is at legal and for GCs, we're very cognizant of the experience we give to our business clients. And whilst there may be efficiencies that we can get, we don't want to compromise the experience for the business for our own efficiencies. And so usually we prioritize the client as we should.
Yes.
And so where I think AI is going to really help bridge that is you're providing actually a better experience to the business, or at least one that does not disrupt and degrade the experience and the relationships that have built over many years, whilst simultaneously getting those efficiencies and the reporting and the data. That's why I'm so excited about AI in this space, because it tackles such a critical problem. And I'll finish with this. I think the buzzword for 2025 when it comes to AI is probably going to be agents. I don't know if the people here have already watched like the Microsoft CEO give a talk at the start of the year around agents and how that's going to change things. But when you think about ChatGPT and all of our experiences probably with AI last year, a lot of it was very conversational based, right? So Q&A back and forth. And we're in that space too at Checkbox. But where things are moving is going beyond just answers and questions and conversations, but actually taking actions, right? So how does the AI actually help us create that matter without having a human do that manual administrative piece? Or how does the AI actually store that contract for us without having to do that for a contract manager, right? So it's an exciting time ahead for AI.
Yes. Yeah, and it's moving so fast to your point of like
Yeah.
the things we were talking about last year. Absolutely. We could build it. Like we could totally build the bots that answer questions automatically and all of that. And it's incredibly fast and powerful. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But also to your point about change management, and I know Cindy's seen this too, where we always fail is where the change management failed. And then the programs fail. No matter how good the technology or the program is that you're implementing, how well thought out it is, if you don't have that right change management in place, it doesn't work. And so to the extent that you could just negate the need for any change management and just have it be, you know, you're doing exactly the same thing as you were, but this stuff is kind of happening automatically in the background, right? It's going to be so much more successful. And so Cindy, as we think about like when you're looking at your department and you're trying to assess it, right, to kind of figure out, okay, what are some of the issues? Because I get this question a lot. I'm sure you hear it too at our, you know, events, link events, and all of that. how do we identify these use cases? How do we identify what's happening in the department that needs to even, be addressed? And this comes along. Yeah, I feel like this is the ops, professional's job, right? To really do this well and to kind of bridge the gap between the practicing lawyers who are kind of heads down and what our teams are doing. So talk a little bit about your process around that.
Yeah, so one, I make sure that our team, the legal ops team, is very keyed in and has relationships with everyone across the company. So um, uh, regular meetings, and I don't have time to do a one-on-one with every single person in the legal department, but those on my team do. So we make sure everyone is covered there. So there's that kind of relationship building and constant information flow, as I talked about before. But we also purposely do sort of an informal assessment, and I don't like to call it an assessment because they're really, just conversations, but we intentionally go out to every person on the team. We do this now, it's every other year, but we ask them a set of questions, and it really is meant to kind of pull out some information from the team, because otherwise, as we all know, there's some people that are squeaky wheels and that are very vocal about
Exactly.
problems, and that can really sometimes steer you astray. It's those are anecdotes, and some of them, I mean, they're valid, right? They're valid feelings, and they're valid, that's really happening to folks. But is that the experience of everyone on the legal team? And so we use those assessments to just touch base, kind of make sure that the team knows that we're listening, but also really pull out that information. And that information has been very critical to our team in deciding, hey, what are the major projects we're going to work on in the next 12 months? Because this is the pain point at this moment for the team. And we need to solve this to make sure that not only the legal team is, functioning okay, everyone's has high morale and is, able to do the work that they need, but that we're also able to support the business. And if there's things that are getting in the way of it, we have to know about it and we have to address it. It also helps us, when we decide those projects, be very crystal clear about what the goal is there in
Yes. You bring up such a good point, because back in my HP days, I definitely fell into that trap of solving, things are coming to me, I'm going to solve them. And we had a couple of squeaky wheels, and about a year in, I realized I'm just working for these people. This is my job. I have like 3 new managers and all I do is work for them. Right. Because that's exactly right. And to your point, that's not necessarily what the department, should be focusing on, what your organization as the ops org should be focusing on. So I always say, we have a question in the comments about how often do you do this? And I mean, to the extent that you can, annually, right? Kind of talk to people and try to gather, okay, it should be part of your strategic planning, right? Like, just going out and having these conversations, like you said, Cindy, it doesn't have to be with everybody, but your team, like you use people on your team to go and have these conversations. It's really testing the temperature and seeing what's happening. And to the extent, I'm curious what Cindy, this is just my advice, by the way, and I'm curious, Cindy, what you've seen, but gather all of the priorities, right? There could be 10, there could be 100, but gather them all together. And then you, as the legal leadership team, this is where we always say ops needs that seat at the table, right? But where you could go to talk to the other leaders and say, hey, here's what we're hearing from the team, and kind of work together to prioritize. But what have you seen work well?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is really important too. And I was going to say that before you brought that up as well. But that information is so powerful. And when we go out, we do tell everyone, this information is going to be confidential between you and I. Like, this is not Cindy taking this and telling the CLO, this person's complaining about this and that. We need to make sure that people feel comfortable talking to us, and that this is not going to be reported out in a way, but it does allow us to take that information and tell leadership and tell the CLO, this is what is really mattering to the team right now. And that kind of information is so important to them because like leadership, right? They're in the management chain of these folks. They're not going to get the same information, and people are not going to talk to them in the same way that they will talk to legal ops. if you are their trusted partner. And so that information has been incredibly important to the leadership team and to the CLO for them to feel, okay, we are doing the right things. We're not doing the right things. What do we need to shift? You know, why are they feeling this way? And so that's an important part of it too. That information, we make sure that it gets to the right places and it's being heard, but we keep it, you know, confidential. Any notes that we take, we keep within our own team, and we only talk about it within the team.
So important.
Hey,
And I think sorry, Evan, I just want to and I'll jump right to you. We fail to remember that not everybody gets the same information that we have, and we take that for granted, right? In terms of just, we assume everybody hears what we hear. And also keeping things confidential. If they could see you as the trusted advisor, you've got the ear of the general counsel, the CLO, but you're not a snitch, so to speak, you know, like you're there to help them and help them develop ideas and whatever. People used to come to me and say, hey, I'm thinking about talking to John about this, but I don't want to bring it right to him. You could help them kind of, you know, they'll see you as their trusted advisor. That will put you in a really important role. And that's so important for the department, because you can, I think, you know, you just bridge the leadership with the rest of the department that way. Sorry, Evan, I cut you off. You wanted to say something there too.
yeah, no, all good. And by the way, I'm starting to glow like a highlighter. I think the sun's reflecting off another building, so please excuse
No, we thought it
the
was a
tone.
hail, the light from heaven shining on you.
No, I was just gonna add another piece I think might be useful. Is, you know, Cindy, you were talking about surveys, right? And Steph doing this annually. I think for a lot of legal teams, I find we may have like offsites, like maybe annual offsites, and that's a great place where if everyone's in the same room, there may be another format of that survey to generate ideas and the roadmap for legal and GCs. One of the sort of facilitation formats that I'm a big fan of is where you kind of get everyone to sit down and in silence, no one's allowed to speak. You have post-it notes and you write down all of the areas of, you know, ideas and improvement that you think can happen. And that way it kind of negates the squeaky wheel. Some people are more vocal than others type thing. Everyone's on the same level playing field. We've got the same amount of time. We write it all down. And then again, silently, you walk up to the wall and you kind of put the post-it notes up there. And then as a group, again, silently, because that's, again, the point of kind of equaling out all the voices, is you start to group and theme the post-it notes into thematics, right? And so it's funny, you get to see people say, well, you know, this one goes here, and someone might say in their mind, no, I think it actually belongs here. And the room kind of self-organizes the collective thoughts. And then you can kind of take that and start to prioritize and kind of roll out the roadmap. And what I really love about that is then you have group consensus on what the priorities actually are, so that when someone says, why isn't the thing that I care about being worked on, they actually understand that to the GC or to the business, or at least to the whole legal department, the reason why we stack ranked it in this way is the way it is. And so there's like that ability to move forward with a confident roadmap.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm gonna steal that.
Me too. The roadmap is your communication tool. So I totally agree with you. It's the visualization of all your priorities. And so that, like, when somebody comes to you and says, hey, this is a priority, you get to pull it out and say, okay, but then how does everything else shift? So it's such an important communication tool. But Evan, I agree. I would really like to see how you get a room full of lawyers being quiet like that too. How you run that exercise. That sounds amazing.
Yeah. Get me in there.
Um,
I'll run it for you.
I love it. Okay. Maybe that should be a link event. We should do something like that.
Sounds
Um,
fun.
I love it. Okay, great. So Evan, how do you think in terms of thinking about like the legal specific platform, how do you think that would help the services that legal is delivering to their clients align with what the business's overarching goals are?
Yeah, so I'll pick
Because
up on
I'm
this.
sorry, just to add some color to that too, because the conversations I have, and I'm curious if you've seen this too,
Yeah.
a lot of legal leadership knows, I think, what the overarching goals are, but the further down you get in the organization, to Cindy's earlier point of not everybody's getting that communication, the less they know. That's I just want to kind of preface it with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this question kind of came up in a different with different phraseology in like a previous webinar last year, and I think it's the label that I'm picking up on is like the legal specific technology to align with the legal team's specific needs, because I think there's all like as legal ops professionals, I'm sure we always get asked, hey, use an existing tool XYZ that we already have in IT or in another part of the company. And as a good citizen of our own corporate company, we should go and explore that. We should at least give that a chance and understand if that can solve our problem, so we don't add another technology or additional cost to the tech stack. But at some point, I think it's really important to appreciate like what are legal specific needs and therefore what is in the best interest for the business when we do select certain technologies to solve that problem. There's probably a whole host of problems where you could use your existing, I don't know, SharePoint or Microsoft tools, etc. But usually we see a deviation from that, and the people in this room, I mean, everyone here are experienced legal ops professionals who have probably onboarded legal specific tools before as well. So I'm not telling you anything you probably don't know, but there's specific areas that I typically see legal ops being able to win that battle around getting a legal specific tool is the first is actually around business adoption, like business user adoption. User experience, I think, is underappreciated when talked about with perhaps business partners that are not from legal. They don't understand that the bar of adoption in getting the business to change in the way they interact with legal, or perhaps even the lawyers to change, is a very high bar. And so the user experience becomes really important. I've seen definitely the case where the business has just given up on certain repositories for contracting because it was just too hard to use. And no matter how much legal or legal ops tried to iterate on that technology, that brand for that solution was just like they were just at the end of it. And so they had to get something specific. So user experience is a big one. Cost of ownership is probably something that we don't think about enough as well. It's an IT concept, which is like once you buy the technology, license fees aside, what is the cost to actually keep it running from like a people time perspective? And a lot of the times, the more IT-centric or enterprise tools can solve a legal problem. It's kind of like you can solve, how do I describe it? Let me give me a silly example. Let's say you wanted to build a car. Let's say you wanted to buy a car. You want a car, and someone said to you, here's a tree. You can make a lot of things out of a tree. You can make tables, you can make bridges, you can make a car. I'm thinking of like a Flintstone car in my mind, right? But you need like a really skilled carpenter to turn that tree into a car. It'd be a whole heck lot easier if you could just probably buy a car that's built to be a car and then accessorize it, right? So when it comes to legal specific technology, I think being able to buy the car outright and then being able to accessorize it to make it your own is going to be a much smaller cost of ownership compared to using an IT specific tool. And then the last thing is really around confidentiality. You have to own the system for legal, right? We talked about Cindy and Steph, like the sensitive matters that sometimes come up in under the legal umbrella. So your technology also needs to be owned by legal, not by some other department that might see things like HR and litigation disputes and things like that.
Yeah. To your point, I think people are kind of done with tools that require session after training sessions, right? Like I remember like implementing tools and recording, like here, take this 10 hours of training to use this tool, and how painful it was to try to get people to use these tools. It's just, I think we're so, in the iPhone world or whatever, where you could download an app and no training is required. It's obvious how you use this. And so to your point of kind of, making that square peg, try to fit that round hole. I don't think people have the tolerance for it, and change management becomes really, really difficult, to our earlier points. And, sometimes how we think of these tools too, when we're evaluating them, is think about it in terms of both like internally, how the lawyers are going to use it. That might be very different than how your clients are going to interact with you. And that's why we've seen such great success in workflow tools. I know you both have too, in how the clients interact with you, right? Like the clients don't care how you're redlining, how you're, building a contract or whatever. They want they want to be able to get to you easily, interact with you easily, be able to see where their status update is easily without checking in with you constantly, etc. And to your other point, Evan, I think that the easier the tool is to use, people are willing to use tools, by the way, but it just has to be super easy. So like if you're the bot that you have for to answer FAQs or something works really well and it's super fast and you get an immediate answer, they will use that versus emailing you, or slacking you, but they're not going to use it if it's not intuitive.
That's right. I can't imagine the Flintstone car being too easy to drive.
Yeah, not unless you have really strong legs.
Yeah.
Okay. Looks like Ali has launched a poll here. And so please answer this question. How would you like to continue the conversation here? We'll see where this goes. I'll give it 30 more seconds, maybe a little less. And I think Ali wants me to let you know that there's other resources listed under the resources button. Okay, let's see. So it's looking like the top one is winning here, and the audience would like to hear about Checkbox's legal intake and matter management.
We've turned this into like a poll, like an actual live poll. It's really exciting to see the results. I've never been more excited about a poll.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
so given this, before we jump to the next topic, do you want to talk a little bit, Evan, about the intake and manner management for Checkbox? I think it's something just to kind of, give people an introduction to this.
Yeah,
We're always
sure.
telling GCs like how important it is to know what work is coming into the department, and you're never going to get lawyers to track time or actually manually do anything. So I do think that these tools are very powerful for that. Okay, great.
I'll keep it brief, and if people want to find out more, you can just reach out afterwards. But if you're, I always think about business outcomes. So, a lot of GCs think about visibility. Visibility often is a data problem, and data is often an intake problem, because if you don't have a good intake, then you don't have the data you need in the form that you need to actually know what's going on in the complete form. So if it's a reporting problem, intake, I think efficiency also feeds into intake as well, because that's how you then use the information to drive automation. So how we think about intake is, again, like we live where the business lives, and then we use automation and AI to first work out, can it be solved using self-service? If yes, chatbot comes in, answers questions, or workflow comes in, collects approvals, or does that conflict of interest, right? And then if it requires an actual attorney, then it automatically creates the matter, and so that they can manage it that way. So that's kind of what Checkbox does at like a sort of like an elevator pitch. But if you want to learn more, you can reach out. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. But you kind of mentioned like capturing that information as it's coming in. So jumping, Cindy, to the concept of like, making data-driven decisions, you have to understand what is happening in the department in order to do that. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you think the role data and metrics play in legal operations in general, and how you gather and report out on all of that?
Yeah. I would actually say that the use of data is more of an art than a science. Obviously it's technology, and there's data and metrics, and you think of it a certain way. But I really think of data as another tool in my toolkit to make the right decisions, set this right strategy, tell the right story about legal and what we're doing. And don't get me wrong, data is the most powerful tool and the one that people don't argue with. And that is why it's powerful. But there's kind of many ways that you tell that story. It really depends who your audience is, what they want to know, and why they want to know it. And so what I learned in my job by trying to do this and not really doing it successfully is that a data dashboard for the sake of a data dashboard that no one really asked for or cared about or is looking at doesn't matter, and it can just be a huge time suck and work to keep it up.
Huge, yeah.
And
Yeah.
we've gone down that path when you know, there was an executive that said we have to have data, like we need data, and we need data that looks like this, right? And so we marched toward that direction. Ultimately, that you know, demand went away, and we were left with this all this data and this dashboard that people didn't particularly find useful. It did instruct us a lot on what data was out there, and going through that exercise is incredibly important. But we've shifted our kind of data strategy to be less about, you know, data for the sake of data, and we're very purposeful about it. And so for us, as an example, and I've talked about this at other events, but we do these QBRs. QBR is a quarterly business report. It's or review. It's something that's common in sales typically, and other similar functions. But we basically use that as a report out internally in legal. And the purpose was to break silos and to make sure that everyone across legal knows what each other is doing. Every practice area leader, there's a certain set of templates that everyone uses, but they're also invited to create their own slides with their own data. So some practice areas are far more data driven, like commercial. We have an intake tool. There's data on volumes, regions, types of requests. And that data is very important for resource allocation, to know, you know, where the trends are and things like that. Product and privacy have certain metrics that they report on every quarter, you know, data subject requests, new product releases that they're involved in, things like that. And they report out on that. Other functions like employment, they're not as data driven and not as metrics driven for obvious reason. They talk more about some of the, at a high level, about some of the projects that they're working on and things that they're tackling, but a lot of what they do is very confidential. So that is not raised in the same way that other functions have. But that QBR is a deck that everyone has pulled together in legal. It's consistent, it's reported out every quarter. And we can then also take that and share it with outside you know, cross-functional partners that want to know what legal is up to. And so that has been a basis for our kind of storytelling about legal. And it is a mix of hard data and other ways of telling that story. And so I hesitate to talk about, you know, data for the sake of data. And, you know, I encourage everyone to just know exactly, be very purposeful about the purpose of that data and why you're doing the work to bring that together.
Yeah. And, you know, and to tie the dots together too, you know, we talked at the very beginning about how it is so important to have that alignment where legal is delivering the services that the organization needs and wants. And that's what your dashboard should speak to, right? To your point about just doing it for the sake of collecting data, it's very time consuming. It's hard. And, you know, maybe someday it won't be, someday soon if if the technology keeps improving. But for now, like, to gather it and put it in a presentable, digestible way is not easy, right? And so but you use it to tell that story, right?
Absolutely, yes. And it is
Mhm.
very critical in a lot of situations. And so like having that intake, for example, for us, just having that real-time data that you can pull and see is so incredible to certain of the decisions that we're making, and certain of, you know, when we're having conversations about that specific function, or are they doing the right things? Is the business changing? That data is incredibly important there.
Yes. And to, you know, I think as we think about sometimes when we work with folks, and I'm sure you've seen this too, they're nervous about collecting the data because they don't think it's going to tell a good story. But what we say is, first of all, you don't have to share this with anybody yet, right? Like this is to get your trend line, start gathering that information, and then you're going to be able to show progress, right? So even if everything is, you don't have anything in place yet, and it's just, your baseline is low, that's good. You're only going to show progress. So don't be afraid of what the data is showing. But to your point too, Cindy, like it is an art yes, there's, some science to it, of course, because it's data and numbers, but how you tell the story is the art. I think that's where the art comes in, right?
Someone asked a question about how big our legal team is. So Nutanix has a legal team of 53 around the world, and currently a legal ops team of 3, although my CLO is very keen on growing that. So hopefully that'll be our big growth next year is in legal ops.
That would be great. Evan, talk a little bit about, as we're talking about the importance of data and how you go about collecting it, how a reporting tool can kind of close that gap between what legal is delivering and the expectations of what legal should be delivering.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what we're talking about around like the art of data, because data itself is objective, but how you slice and dice it is the art to it. Like in my role as a CEO of a SaaS company, I do a lot of fundraising and I have to constantly present data to investors. And the same thing, like the same number or the same metric can be sliced in different ways to support certain stories that actually reflect what is happening in the business. But it's hard sometimes when you just look at the metrics to create those stories yourself. And so being able to do that is important. And I think how the reporting tool might do that. And if I tie it again, like this idea of like the art of data, I think the art of data is either you're using it to support and affirm a narrative that you already know, or you're using it to make a decision to uncover insights that you actually don't know what the answer is. And so when you think about a reporting tool or a dashboard for legal, we use Cindy's examples of through the intake tool, what is coming in from which parts of the business, the nature of them, geographies. There's so many ways you can look at the intake data. You can have situations where let's talk about maybe affirming. Let's do the affirming one. So there's a particular hypothesis that the business is unhappy with legal because they say that we take too long on turning around commercial contracts, right? And so
No one's ever heard that before. No one complains about that.
Well, in the rare case that you have, let me tell you what you could do. So with data, you could in fact start to measure the different stage gates between different participants in the commercial workflow. So how long has it been staying with our legal contracting review team versus our own internal IT team? Because maybe there's an AI clause or an IT clause that they're reviewing. Maybe it's with procurement for negotiation. Maybe it's with the counterparty. I think without having the data in place, it's hard sometimes, well, actually often, to be able to have that conversation when we talk about expectations with the business around that turnaround time. That's one example. Another example might be just to eliminate the black box that is sometimes legal. I've heard that language being used still by some legal ops professionals coming to us and saying that's the challenge right now. People don't know what's happening in legal. And because of that, it's hard for them to get resourcing. And so even reporting, telling the story of this is how much work is coming in. In fact, if you can measure it over a period of time, let's say 2 years, this is what it was a year ago. This is what it is today. The legal work has doubled because the company has grown so much. Hooray. But our headcount has not. So how do you expect us to continue to have the same level of turnaround time or the diligence to manage risk for the business? And so without that reporting or the data, it is a black box for the business. And especially if we have a big outside counsel spend, people often don't understand. Perhaps a CFO might look at legal and say, well, you're spending already so much on outside counsel. Why do you need another headcount internally? And so that data allows us to have those conversations, bridge those expectations with leadership.
And we've frankly seen when we've implemented these systems that so often legal gets blamed for the delays, but it's not legal's fault. Sometimes it is, but having that data showing how very frequently, legal bounce back and asked a question and it sat with the client for, 2 weeks, but legal gets blamed for that, right? And so being able to show where the real bottlenecks are, I think is so important too.
Absolutely. And look, every function in the business is always going to have areas of improvement and some better than others. And it's all in cycles, right? And I think as a GC, I think any GC, if their legal department was the bottleneck, I'm sure they would want to at least know and then have the ability to improve that performance, right? And so whether it's not legal, whether it is legal, I think the data is helpful either way. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're coming up on time, but and I don't see any questions, but please do, I said use the chat here and ask us any questions. But Cindy, how about any final thoughts from you, kind of as we round off this discussion? Was there anything that we didn't talk about, or do you have anything you want to make sure that you share with the audience?
I don't think so. I think we talked about everything. I mean, getting back to the main topic of this, kind of the partnership with GC and legal ops. My company recently pulled in a new CLO 6 months ago after my former one retired, and he was there for 7 years. So he really oversaw the start of legal ops and all of that. And that's been quite a learning experience for me, creating a new working relationship with a different GC who thinks differently about things. But it's really taught me so much about the importance of that relationship between GCs and legal ops, and seeing the two sides of the coin. And so really developing that relationship with your GC. And if they're newer to legal ops and they're kind of untested yet, the data that you have is a powerful tool in educating them, not even talking about telling the business what we're doing. The data is really going to be extremely convincing for a GC that's newer to legal ops as well. And so, I also want to encourage folks not only to use data to kind of talk about business objectives, but really educate internally in legal as well, with other practice groups on why legal ops is important, but also educating your GC on why legal ops is important.
Great point. You could really be that ear to the ground that they can't necessarily play. Good point. How about you, Evan?
I think when we think about the relationship between legal ops and the GC, I know a lot of it has been a lot of the discussion, and a lot of how we think is how do we better align with the business objectives and therefore help the GC in that way. But it is a two-way relationship, right? And the most successful legal ops professionals and projects start really at the top. It's actually, if you have the right leader who's bought into legal operations and transformation and understands these concepts, you're going to have a much more natural relationship and one that's going to be much more successful. And of course, you don't get to always choose who your GC is, but I think there is an opportunity for us to educate, as Cindy said, GCs as to what is the importance of legal ops. And there's many forums even bring them along. Like Steph, we talked about at the very beginning, Link is now part of something much bigger where we bring together the two communities. There's platforms for that, and I think it's so important. If you want to build that strong relationship, it's not a one-way thing; it is a two-way thing. And the more places you can help your GC learn more about legal operations, the stronger that will be.
Well, thank you both. I think this is really interesting. I hope for me anyway, I hope the audience found it equally as interesting, and appreciate everybody for joining today. Thank you.
Thank you. Great discussion. See you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Bye, Steph. See everyone.
Bye, everyone.